Hello, everybody. I'm just going to do a little ramble. First of all, I should let you all know I lost my little camera, the one I used to take videos. I've had it for like 3 years, and I went to the beach one day. I had a nephew visiting from out of town to go to the beach, and I guess it was in my bag, and I was probably careless, and it was a tote bag, but the top was open, and I don't know, it probably fell out. I have no idea, but when I got home, it was gone. And I have a Sony Handycam from the 1990s, and it's so old, you can't even... There's a place for a computer chip on it, but for some reason, back then they didn't have the technology. I don't know, it doesn't work. So somebody told me I needed to buy a special wire called a fire wire so that I could use it as a webcam. And it's gonna take really good videos, probably better quality videos than my little digital camera, because it's a good quality camera for the time, at the time that my parents bought it. Can you hear frogs? It's really rainy in Florida this time of year, so these big fat white frogs just stick to the side of walls and are croaking all night. And I just heard one. But having a little bit of a gossip. Now, I hope the sound on this webcam isn't so bad. I have a teeny bit of gossip. That something that happened to me that I'm kind of happy about, but I feel guilty for feeling happy. But I got a story to tell. So, about a year ago. Now I'm not going to go start extrapolating. I'm just going to tell the story. So about a year ago, I was in a chat room. It was a political, very, politically charged chat room with people were there with different opinions, and that's what it was meant to be. And and I was in there under a fake name, of course. I didn't want my real identity because, first of all, you never know who else is in there. If you use your real identity, and you could offend someone, it could be someone you know, and so I was in there, and I signed in under a fake name, login. And, well, I had been in that group a few times to chat and talk politics and things, and because you learn a lot when you're anonymous. You're more there's good and bad about it. The good side is that you're less intimidated about asking difficult questions and maybe confronting people in a politically correct way. Of course, I'm not saying you got to start, people start insulting each other and all that, but I would confront people, but I think in a correct manner, but we would be debating. So it was just a bunch of people, and then there would be a man, who's in charge of the chat room, and it's actually, sometimes they would get on the Google Hangout. So some of the people, you actually did know their identity, but they didn't care. So, or maybe you don't know their identity, but you could see their face and everything. But I wanted to remain anonymous, so I kept my fake name, and I just would, so in Google Hangouts, you can do a chat on the side, and so people will be talking, and then you chat on the side. So anyway, I got into this argument with this lady that was in there. And I didn't know her identity at the time, but, she was really a bee, I mean, seriously, she wasn't being politically correct about her opinion, she was being insulting, and, whatever, how people, sometimes you don't mesh with certain people, and this, for some reason, we were both anonymous, but our personalities clashed, with all the people in the room, you're bound to not get along with someone. So, but she was really, the reason I clashed with her is because I was like, how dare you? Some of the stuff she was saying, it was on the topic of, it doesn't matter what the topic was. I don't want to get, because that's not the point of the story. But anyway, she really, and of course I know, obviously I'm going to think that I was right, and And I'm not saying that I was right about the politics, but I was right about the way I voiced my opinion. I was correct about it. I didn't insult anyone, but she was being insulting to me and to other people, I felt. But whatever. So we argued back and forth, and then she started like saying, "Oh, this woman needs to get kicked out of the room. She needs to be blocked," and whatever. I mean, I don't know why, but I ended up getting, and I didn't insult her. It just makes me mad. But I ended up getting booted out of the chat room. But I honestly didn't think it was fair because I was being correct. I wasn't agreeing with her, but maybe my point of view wasn't in agreement with many of the people in the room. But it was my opinion. That's what we're in there for, to open people's minds. And so whatever, So I was like furious, and so I got kicked out of the room and blocked. So I couldn't get back in, but I could still see, when you get blocked on a hangout, you can still see what other people are writing, and you can still watch the hangout. You're just not allowed to type in there anymore. And you could always sign up with a different name, a different account, unless they blocked your IP address, but go back in there and pretend you're someone else. But I didn't do that. I was just furious because that wasn't the point. Sure, I could have logged in as a fake person, but the point was I should have been respected for having my own opinion. Not because it wasn't in agreement with everyone else or most of the people in the room that I should be kicked out. But on top of that, she was the one saying bad words and insulting. I wasn't. I just merely stuck to my point that this is how I think it is, and I continued arguing with her, yes. But she continued arguing with me. She should have gotten booted out of the room too. But anyway, whatever. I was just furious, and I hated the woman, and I said, oh, and I was still watching, the hangout and whatever, and she was actually very rude to other people too, not just me. But the other people backed down quick enough, so maybe nobody noticed. But because after that, obviously I was so furious with her and hated her so much, I was going to watch everything she did. So, I saw that she was, really kind of a bully, and made me mad. So, whatever. That day ended. But then a few days later, I logged back on. I didn't log on. I was watching because it was a group that would get together often. It was a regular political chat group. So I was in there again. There she was again, the stupid bee, and being rude to people, and she had her screen name. I'm not gonna. So I thought to myself, I was still mad. It was still less than a week later. I was still mad at her, not even knowing who she was. But I said, I am gonna somehow, some way, I am gonna get revenge on this person. I'm gonna find out who she is, and I wasn't planning on going and hurting her physically, but I was gonna just do something, Like, I wanted to humiliate her online somehow, the way she humiliated me. But the way I felt humiliated getting booted out of that room. So I said, oh, and I watched, and then she was like, I guess somehow, when you start to feel comfortable with people, then you do start to, you maybe forget that there might be people watching, which she obviously did. She probably didn't even think I cared or whatever. And so she at one point did reveal her identity. She had made a few acquaintances in the chat room because she'd been there often enough, and so she posted in the chat room her Twitter link. Because people saying, hey, what do you look like? What do you look like? And she had told us she was about a certain age, which is, not, she's younger than me, but she wasn't young. She was like close to 40, late 30s actually. So, still at the age where you might be trying to, whatever, impress people with your looks or something. So at one point she posts a link to her Twitter, and she's this beautiful woman, gorgeous, just really attractive woman from up, I found out what state she lives in and everything. So, there it was. I found out who she was, and her name and everything. She used her real name on Twitter. So I said, yes, now's my chance. Now I have to plan my revenge. I was going to try to find a way to humiliate her. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was like, oh, I'm going to find dirt on her. So I Googled her name, all through Google, and I've gotten really good at Googling people's names. This happened about a year ago, actually, what I'm talking about. It's a long story. I'll try to cut it. I'll edit. So anyway, I Googled her name. I did all the different things I do to find stuff on people, but I didn't, the stuff I found on her was just normal stuff. Just she lives here, she might work at this place, whatever, just normal stuff. Nothing like juicy that I could humiliate her with. So I was like, oh, bummer, well, I guess, what can I do? She's just but what I did find I'll take that back. So I didn't really find anything on her other than stuff that she'd already said in the chat room, that she was from where she lived, and, her age approximately, all this stuff. So I was like, oh, well, too bad. I don't have any dirt on her. But then I thought to myself, okay, why don't I Google her screen name? I Googled her screen name just to see, hey, maybe there's some dirt on her here. And what I did find was that she's very rude to lots of people on the internet, because then with that same screen name, she writes in forums and stuff, and a lot of times it's about politics, and she's really rude to people, not just me. She was rude to people in forums, and because you could see what the latest forums posts that they've been on, and she's used that name all the time. So I was like, and I wanted to make sure it was the same, because a lot of people might use the same screen name, but looking through the reading, I realized it was her, because it said where she lived, and I was pretty sure it was her. And she would put the picture next to the name, the same picture she had on her Twitter, so I realized it was her. And and the way she writes, even her style of writing, her verbs, the words she uses, also, you sort of use your intuition a bit, but you can tell it's the same person, because there were other people on the internet with that same screen name. So I had to sort out which ones were her and which were the other people, but some were obviously not her. So it was interesting. It was kind of fun, actually, like being like a detective. So anyway, just to make a long story short, because this is getting kind of long. So I saw that, but what I found with my searching and digging deeper, the girl had a page on a website for looking for prostituting yourself. And at first I couldn't believe it. I said, wait, that's not her, because the picture, she showed the picture, her real picture, fake name, but it was, silly girl used her screen name, the screen name she uses everywhere else. So stupid girl, obviously you're going to use a screen. But anyway, so I found that, and I wanted to be sure it was her. Now when you're prostituting yourself, and I'm not doing this, I'm not saying this from experience, but if you're going to prostitute yourself, you got to let the guy know where you live, obviously. So it was where she lived. The picture looked sort of like the girl in the picture on Twitter, but older. Like, she wasn't as attractive as the picture on Twitter, but there were a lot of similarities, but I wasn't even sure from the picture if it was the same girl at first. So I looked at each and every detail, and I realized what she'd done. The picture on Twitter, she's this gorgeous, thin, beautiful, sexy woman. It was probably a picture from years ago. And the picture she had on this prostitute site, she wasn't hugely fat, but she had gained some weight. She just wasn't as pretty. You get older, what can you do? Usually you just don't get any better looking. You usually start to not look as good. So, so she looked like she was probably the same girl, but 20 years older. Not quite as attractive. And, so I was, I was very careful, and by the end of my research, whatever, I was 99% sure that it was her. So I said, yes, yes, now I can get my revenge. Now I've got dirt on her. So I was planning this revenge. I was going to sign up in the chat room with another screen name, the same chat room that she still was hanging out in. This was like, by the time I found this prostitute site, it was like weeks later. But I was still, and I know I seemed like a stalker. I guess I sort of was, because I was so humiliated. And actually, I did like the chat room, even aside from her. I did like that political chat room. I don't go back there anymore, but I would see her in there always fighting with people and being mean to people, and I would just relive the anger and the humiliation that I felt when I got kicked out. So like I wanted to, so this was a few weeks later, I found this thing, about her. And let's say 2 weeks later, it wasn't that much later. I mean, it was still fresh enough that I was still mad and still hoping to. Okay, so I had this whole plan. I was going to sign up with a fake screen name, another one, not the one that got blocked. Go back in the room, pretend I was a new person. Just, hey, I just found out about this chat room. How is everybody? Just start to get into it. And knowing her, because I realized how she was and the bully she was and everything, I would start to say a few things that would probably get her goat, and so we would get into a fight. Because one of the things she did to me when we were arguing, oh, you're probably such a fat, ugly bee. Why don't you post your picture? That was part of her thing, like belittling other people for not being attractive or challenging them. Like, it was kind of weird, frankly. I mean, if someone almost 40 years old challenging you to a look contest, but yeah, compared to the picture that she had on Twitter, even if I would have been willing to post a picture of myself, which I wasn't, I certainly wouldn't have won the beauty contest against her. So that was my plan. I was going to fight. And then when she got to the point where she started challenging me on looks, hey, post a picture of yourself, see how ugly you are. You're probably really fat or something like that, like she said to me. I was going to get the link from the prostitution site. You'd say, oh, here's a picture of me. And then I was going to say, oh, oops, sorry, wrong link. So I was so excited about doing this. I was going to do it. And I was planning, okay, when the chat room, it was like 2 or 3 times a week that they met. So I was going to go to but then I just, after I got all after planning it, in my head, but I hadn't actually done it, I sort of felt the satisfaction there. So to actually go through with it and actually do it sort of felt like, why am I going to do that? I mean, and I was thinking, I mean, she is a bee. She probably deserves it, but I'm just going to just forget it. I mean, and this was a few weeks later. I'd sort of calmed down by then, and so I ended up not doing it. I ended up saying, all right, whatever, stupid bee, And I actually, when I found her picture on that site, I actually a part of me, a very small part of me, felt even a teeny bit sorry for her, because I was like, what could be going on in her life that she's in such a state that she has to, I mean, I'm not judging prostitutes. That's the other thing. I don't judge prostitutes, because you don't know what condition their life is that they would, have to do that unfortunate, activity to make money, because maybe they don't have other options for whatever reason. And, and so there were a lot of reasons why I started thinking about it. I'm like, okay, I got my satisfaction now. I found dirt on her. I mean, it's kind of sad, she's not even as attractive as in her picture that she pretends that she still looks like. I mean, that part also made me feel a little sorry for her. And it just sort of made her look silly. Like, this poor girl is losing her looks, so she's got to put a picture up there from years ago and challenge people, like she would challenge people to put their pictures up to compare with her or whatever. So, all right, so I never ended up doing it, and whatever. Time went on, and I, stopped being mad about it, and but. Every so often I would still go to that chat room and I'd see her in there, and by this point, but I never went back in. I was always just an observer at that point. So at one time, like a few months later, I would still watch and it's probably not good to get all riled up about politics anyway. I mean, if about 6 months later, after that whole thing happened, and I'd gotten kicked out of the chat. I saw her kind of making a group of friends in the chat room. She'd made up, of people I guess she had like opinions with, and they seemed to get along. And so they planned another group outside of that chat room. They had planned to start a Google Hangout, just their little clique that had formed. It was a nice little group. I mean, I'm not at that point. She was still a bee, but everyone else in the group seemed kind of interesting, just youngsters and different age people talking about politics and their opinions. But they seemed to mesh, so they started this other group. And they were invited, and the thing is that the lady who decided, not the lady that's the bee, I'm going to call her the bee, short for, what word, a female dog. The bee didn't start the outside group. It was one of the other ladies who appeared to be very pleasant. She decided, hey, why don't we do a Google Hangout of our own, and, we could come to this chat room too sometimes, but we could have our own kind of show and do Google Hangouts and, monetize and make some money. There's nothing wrong with that. So, and they started that other hangout, but they invited everyone from this hangout to join them if they wanted to. They said, hey, we're starting another hangout if you guys want to sometimes go over there, But it didn't really... So, about 30 people subscribed to their Google Hangout and YouTube channel, and I was one of them. Because I was curious. Part of me was curious. Part of me was still a little teeny bit, I don't want to say obsessed. I still was giving a little follow-up to the bee, just to see, when, I was sensing that, because I'd seen her fight with people before, other than me. So I was thinking to myself, and, I told you on the forum, she's always fighting with people. So she's obviously an argumentative bee, and she also gets very offended easily and all this stuff. So I thought to myself, I wonder what the dynamics are going to be in this group where it's going to be very, small amount of people. Only about 30 people were subscribed, and only about 6 or 7 of them actually showed their real identities and would go on the Google Hangouts. And she would go on the Google Hangouts sometimes, but she would not show her real face. So you never really saw her. She would have she'd have an icon or something. So you'd hear her voice, though. So I was watching that for a while, and it was kind of boring, frankly. It was kind of boring. The people didn't have the pizzazz that the people from the first Hangout had. The people from the first Hangout were funny. They were, and this Hangout that they started was okay, but it really wasn't very interesting. So I stopped watching it. I kind of just, it got old, and I stopped caring, and I didn't care what happened to the bee anymore. And so, but just out of curiosity, I had joined that group. And so, and I moved on. And now, so here's what happened. So here's the clincher. So a few days ago, I decided, I wonder what's going on with that group. I hadn't been back since whenever, months earlier. I wonder how that group's doing. Maybe it's gotten more interesting. Maybe it's taken off. Let's see what happens. What it's about. So I clicked in there, see what was going on, and they had done some Google Hangouts. They'd done several. They had actually done them regularly, like 2 or 3 times a month, or maybe even more sometimes. But the latest 2 videos were about the girl with that screen name, the bee. I call her the bee. She had another screen name, and I'm not going to say the screen name. And like sort of the title was showing that they were sort of disrespecting her, dissing her. I was like, oh my gosh, what is this about? I was really curious. So I clicked on the shorter one first, because one of them was like 2 hours, where they spent the 2 hours just completely roasting this girl. And I was like, oh, I wonder what happened. So I clicked, and on the shorter one. And on there was the nice lady who had actually started the group. You know, she was the founder of the group, and she said, well, you know, this person has really surprised us how badly she's behaved and the way she's insulted certain people. And, you know, apparently she'd said even, I mean, really bad thing. I mean, really, you know, just unpleasant. And she'd done some unpleasant things and she'd fought with the people, which I sort of knew from the stuff I'd found out about her on the forums and stuff. And, you know, and that's not nice. And then she said, and actually, you know, the lady who was doing the video said, and at one point she said, and I mean, you're not as tough as you try to act you are, and you're not all that. I mean, come on. I don't remember exactly the words, but she said something like, I mean, if you were, you wouldn't be on this prostitution site, you know, which, so I was like, oh my God, they found it. But I guess if I could find it using her screen name, other people could too. And I guess she had gotten into a fight with someone in there and said something really mean, and the person did what I did, like to get revenge on her, searched her screen name. But that girl wasn't, the person who searched her screen name wasn't as nice as I was. Because I decided to just like, okay, I got the pleasure of imagining what I could have done with it, but I didn't actually go through with it. So, but this girl, oh my gosh, she's like in her 20s, the girl who let the cat out of the bag. You know, so maybe she just, you know, I wouldn't have done it if I were her, but whatever. I mean, if I were in my 20s, I might have, you know, but as you get older, you realize that getting revenge on someone doesn't really pay. You know, it makes you feel good for the moment, but you don't know, you know, how it could affect that person. You think more about the consequences that aren't necessarily consequences against you, but, or they could be if they find out, you know, but there are consequences. It could be, now in this case, the girl who did release the information about her, we know her identity. So the bee, if she's crazy enough, might decide to get revenge on her physically. You know, I don't think that's going to happen. They actually live very far away from each other. But you just, I don't know, it's sort of playing with fire doing that. But anyway, okay, so I was like, okay, oh my gosh, they found out the information, and, you know, they decided to release it. So throughout this little group, it's only about 30 people. You know, they're making fun of her. Well, and the people on the Hangouts are only, like I said, 8 or 9. So, but you know, anyone can watch those videos and see the information right there. And then one day, so then I went to one of the longer videos. It was like the 2-hour video roasting this girl, saying all this stuff about her, how she was faking, all the stuff that I found out that I just decided to, whatever, poor girl, she's like such a loser. He said, you know, the picture she had on Twitter was like from 20 years ago, and now she weighs, you know, this many pounds, and she's ugly, and her, you know, they would even making fun of her makeup and everything, because, you know, on the website, and they posted her profile from the prostitution site right there on the YouTube video, and they're like tearing it apart, like, look at how she's here, and here, look what she says here, and she said all this stuff, and, you know, God, what a whore, you know, and just really roasting this girl. And what was I was gonna say something else. Oh, just completely what I was imagining doing, but worse. Like, I was imagining the pleasure I would get from humiliating her in that chat room, which actually if I would have done it, it would have been even worse for her, because the original chat room, I was going to release it in that chat room, and that had hundreds of people in here. The people watching the video where they released the information now are, you know, there's not that many people in that Google Hangout. I don't think it's going to become popular because it's very boring. But here's the thing. So then I was like, oh my gosh. So that's it. They took a screenshot of it. So now the girl knows that they know, and I did go back to the site to see, and the profile is now gone. So obviously the girl, now that she'd been found out, you know, went back and deleted her profile, but they still have the screenshot of it there forever. So I'm sorry, I shouldn't be laughing, but a teeny part of me was happy. I know that's mean, but you know, I kind of, I don't know. I don't feel sorry for her, I guess, because yeah, I have a personal anger, from back a year ago, but I guess the point of this video is karma does come around. You don't have to take it into your own hands to get revenge. Karma will end up playing out. And that's what happened. A year ago, I was kicked out of the chat room. I was humiliated. I was dejected. I was miserable. I was crying, but not crying from sadness. I was crying from the frustration, and I was so furious, you know. And here we are, a year later. This girl, she disappeared, of course, from the group, and I've Googled her since. Either she's using another screen name, or she's just off the internet completely, because I'm no longer finding her posting in any forums or anything. So anyway, oh, and the thing about karma, and see, this is the other thing. It does play out. I do believe it. If somebody is evil, sooner or later, karma is going to get them. And some people don't believe that, and I sort of don't think you have to trust everything 100% to karma, but because it's not only just karma, it's also the type of person she was, which she showed to me. She was bound to rub other people the wrong way too, and so it was bound to happen that someone was going to do something like this. So what happened, and then that made me think, it's sort of how weird how it all went on another tangent. I said, like, look at O.J. Simpson. Look what happened to him. We don't know. Okay, she was found not guilty of murder of his ex-wife and another gentleman. Many people felt that was unfair because he, even if there wasn't proof that he was the actual person who, I think there wasn't concrete proof, it had beyond the reasonable doubt that he actually was the one wielding the knife in the murders. There was no doubt at all that he was involved in some way. I mean, even people who were on his side can no longer deny that he was somehow involved in those murders. Many say he actually committed them. We don't know. I do believe in the word of the law here in the U.S. And if it wasn't proven without by a reasonable doubt, we don't have proof that he actually did it. But there is really pretty much no doubt that he was involved. But anyway, that's not so much the point as, he was found not guilty. He was free to go, live his life, whatever. And I remember Ron Goldman's father, like, coming out on TV and saying, this is just, his son was murdered, and he said this justice was not served. This is crazy. My son was murdered by this person, and he's free to go and live his life. And he, I remember how sorry I felt for everyone involved. I felt sorry for O.J. Simpson too, because he was someone he was so loved, and how sad that he didn't get the mental help he needed in time to prevent him from doing this act or being involved in this kind of act, but whatever. Obviously, Ron Goldman's family wanted revenge. They want, they're. But now, where is O.J. Simpson today? He's in jail, and he's probably in there for the rest of his life. And even if he does get out on parole soon, I think he's up for parole. He's in jail for another crime that he committed, and if he doesn't get parole, basically he's going to die in jail. And even if he gets parole, at this point, he's been in jail for a while. He's aged. His reputation is gone, completely gone. Nobody wants to be connected with him anymore. When he gets out, he might have some money left. I don't know, but for the most part, he's not going to be able to get more money. His life is basically ruined. Even if he gets out, which who knows? Because so many people were feeling how unfair it was about him getting off for the murders. we don't know. But so I think, that doesn't make anyone's your family member was murdered. It doesn't make you feel necessarily any better. But I mean, maybe the Goldman family and perhaps the Simpson family, the Nicole Brown family, maybe they have some closure, not closure even, I don't know what the word is, but maybe it makes it feel good that at least the guy is in jail and getting some punishment, even though it's for a different crime, because he had gone into a Las Vegas hotel room with guns, and I don't remember, I think someone had stolen his memorabilia and he was trying to get it back. But you don't do it that way. If somebody stole your stuff, you go to the police, so you tell them, this guy stole my stuff, can we please go in there and retrieve my things? He could have gone in with the policeman. But so karma will get you. So be a good person. Try not to hurt people. Try to not insult people online or offline. And don't try to get revenge on people. I guess that's the moral of the story, because revenge will come. And sometimes if you try to get revenge, the consequences of you doing that could be very, very, you don't know what the consequences could be. So it could lead to a murder, it could lead to a suicide. Revenge is, and I'm not a Bible thumper, but some of the things that are said in the Bible are common sense, even if you don't believe in God. And even, and one of the things that we're taught in Catholic school, I went to Catholic school, revenge is envy. Revenge, is not, it's one of the deadly sins even. You should not be feeling revenge or envy. I think it's envy. I'm mixing up my sins here. But anyway, revenge is not something you should be out for. You can get revenge in more mature ways. For example, okay, here's talking about revenge. The Holocaust. The Jewish people, they were murdered in by the thousands by the Nazis, and families were murdered. Some people who survived the Holocaust had their entire families murdered, and they were the only ones left. I mean, and they had to go on with life. And what's the revenge? I remember hearing one of the survivors say, my revenge is not let them ruin my life, is to be happy and show them that they didn't get me. That was her. It was a little old lady, I think they were interviewing. I don't even remember where I saw that, but it's something that had never occurred to me, and I was younger when I heard her. She said, my revenge is, because they asked her, how can you go on after your whole family was murdered and you're the only one left, and you were tortured and you were starved and all this stuff. And she said, and she had an accent, from, I don't know where she was from, but one of those European countries. She said, yes, that my revenge is that I am happy, because that's what they didn't want for me. Because of me being Jewish, they didn't want me to be happy. So my revenge is that I am happy and I enjoy my life and I'm here. And so that's how I don't always practice what I preach, but I think we should strive for that kind of revenge if we're going to be wanting revenge, for anything. Even, maybe a guy, cheats on you, or a wife, maybe your wife cheats on you. Women cheat too. I don't want to be sexist here. Maybe a woman cheats on you and it runs off with another man and leaves you, high and dry, or vice versa. Men can do it to women can do it. But what's your revenge? Your revenge is move on. If you go over and kill her, some people get revenge, will go over and murder the two of them. The wife that cheated, or the husband that cheated, and the girlfriend. But then you go to jail. So, okay, you killed people. Maybe it felt good in the moment, but now you're in jail, and so your revenge is to, first of all, a man who cheats or a woman who cheats is probably going to do it again. And actually, that is what happened. I know a personal story of a lady who was married to a man. They're not friends of mine, but they're They were co-workers of my brother up in Boston. The man cheated on his wife with one of the girls who worked in the office. And, you know, over time it was all found out, and the guy left his wife for this younger, prettier girl who worked in the office. And, you know, obviously the first wife was distraught. She had young children, and I think he did pay child support, but so then what happened? Okay, so she carried on with her life. I guess you get over it. And the same guy, as time, he was very charming and he was quite successful. Time wore on. He cheated on the second girl with a third girl from work that he'd met through work. Not in the office, but so he did the same thing to the second wife as he did to the first wife. So the first wife could be, you know, like really seeing, well, see, you know, that's what she gets, you know, because she knew he was married when she decided to get with him. And so her revenge on the girl, at least, maybe not on her husband, but was that, see, well, what goes around comes around. So it will, one way or another, if you misbehave, you may not see it, you know, you may not actually get the pleasure of seeing karma at work, but it will get the person. Something will happen, and the person will get something, you know. And if they don't, even so, you have to just don't try to get revenge. It's you have your life that you have to enjoy. And thanks for listening, guys. And I'll be getting a good camera soon, because I don't think this even records very well. It's this crappy little webcam. Bye.